Power is not what people think it is. It's not loud. It's not always visible. In this rare interview, Robert Greene, master of strategy and author of The 48 Laws of Power, reveals the unspoken truths about human behavior, ambition, and the hidden currents beneath success. This is a journey through strategy, suffering, and the sublime. Welcome to the mind of a modern Machiavelli.
Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we dig into your sources to find those key nuggets of knowledge.
Yeah, and today we're plunging into a world that, well, it can feel a bit uncomfortable sometimes, can it?
It really can. We're talking power, human nature, navigating those, let's say, complex social dynamics.
And our guide for this, based on the sources you sent, is largely Robert Greene, drawing a lot from an interview discussing his work, like the 48 Laws of Power.
Right. We got requests asking about, how to understand power better, maybe get your way, figure out why people do what they do.
And find those hidden truths people don't always talk about.
Exactly. So our mission here is to pull out some surprising facts, some useful insights from this material.
Hopefully giving you a clearer picture of these, well, often unspoken parts of life and work.
Okay, let's get into it. How does Greene actually come up with these sometimes pretty startling ideas? It's not like he's just, theorizing in a vacuum.
Oh, absolutely not. It's actually a really fascinating mix. Part of it is incredibly deep historical research, like reading hundreds and hundreds of books. He looks at historical figures, kings, queens, financiers, you name it.
Right.
And he treats their stories almost like data, looking for trends in human nature over centuries.
So history as a giant data set for human behavior.
Pretty much. But, and this is key, he combines that with really intense personal experience.
Okay.
He mentioned having, something like 50 or 60 different jobs before he landed on writing.
Wow, 50 or 60, that's a lot of different environments.
Exactly. And in all those places, he ran into, everyone. The political types, the manipulators, the ones who were just completely incompetent.
Yeah, you see it all.
And he talks about this sort of personal pain fueling his work, seeing how the world really operates, which often isn't how we're told it should.
That friction.
Right, that friction made him want to kind of pull back the curtain and show these dynamics.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. That combination of deep history and, messy real-world experience. Okay, let's dig into some specific laws. Law number 1 from 48 laws, probably the most famous: never outshine the master.
It is, yeah. And it gets so much attention because it kind of flies in the face of typical advice, right? Just work hard, do good work.
And you'll get noticed, yeah.
But Greene's point, especially when you're starting out, is that competence isn't everything. You absolutely have to factor in the ego of the person you report to.
Their ego, right.
Your success, if you're not careful about how you present it, can actually make them feel threatened or insecure.
The source material had this really vivid personal story about that. The interviewer got pushed out of 2 finance firms.
Yeah, and fired from a TV research job.
And by all accounts, they were doing great work, growing a business line, being the top researcher.
But they didn't realize they were, in effect, stealing the spotlight. They were making the boss feel, less important.
And that's the danger.
That story just nails it. It's that dirty little secret Greene mentions, this unspoken political layer in any hierarchy.
So you can be brilliant, but if your boss feels overshadowed,
You're playing with fire. Especially early on, you need to manage that perception, make them look good, share the credit,
it feels so counterintuitive, almost unfair.
Maybe. But Greene would argue it's realistic. It's about understanding how these power structures actually function, not just how we wish they would.
Okay, let's switch gears. Law 10. Infection. Avoid the unlucky and the unfortunate. That one sounds harsh.
It does sound harsh, and it's easy to misunderstand. He clarifies in the source, though.
Okay.
He's not saying ditch people who've had genuine bad luck or are victims of circumstance. He's talking about people who seem to consistently create their own drama, chaos, and misfortune.
The ones who are like magnets for trouble.
Exactly. They attract negative energy. Maybe they make poor choices repeatedly. Maybe they're manipulative, but play the victim.
Okay, so it's less about luck and more about a pattern of self-generated negativity.
Precisely. And the infection part is the danger of getting drawn into their world. Their drama becomes your drama. Their negativity drags you down. It's like emotional quicksand.
Is there anything more concrete than just anecdotes for that, like real-world data?
Well, the source did mention this one study that's pretty interesting, relating to this idea, a study of, I think it was 1,000 companies.
Yeah.
It found that if you physically sit within about 25 feet of a high performer,
Okay.
you're about 15% more likely to improve your own performance. Which kind of makes sense, right? Positive
Yeah.
influence.
Yeah, osmosis.
But here's the kicker. Sitting near a low performer made you 30% more likely to underperform yourself.
30%. Wow, that's significant.
It really is. It lends some serious weight to that idea of infection, doesn't it? That the energy and habits of people around you can tangibly affect you.
It definitely makes you think about who you spend your time with, even physically.
Right. Okay, and briefly, Law 4. Always say less than necessary. What's the core idea there?
Power and silence.
Basically, yeah. Talking less creates a kind of mystique. People read into your silence, they might think you're deeper or more powerful than you are. Plus, your words carry more impact when you do speak. And critically, you avoid saying something dumb or revealing too much accidentally.
It's strategic restraint. Keeps people guessing.
Exactly. And forces them to maybe reveal more themselves to fill that silence.
Okay, let's shift to something Greene really emphasizes, especially for younger people trying to gain control or, well, power. Observation. Decoding people.
Yes, this is super practical stuff. He feels one of the most underrated skills, particularly today, is just observing others well, being outer directed.
As opposed to
being consumed by your own thoughts and insecurities, inner directed. Yeah. Constantly worrying, how am I coming across? Did I say the wrong thing? Do they like me?
Right, you're stuck in your own head.
Totally. And while you're busy doing that, you miss all the signals people are constantly giving off. Greene says, everything is a sign. Little things, how someone shows up late, if they return calls quickly, the state of their desk, even the subtle tone in an email.
These aren't random details.
He argues they're not. They tell you something about their discipline, their respect for others, their emotional state, their attention to detail. You have to be like a detective.
Picking up clues.
Exactly. And the biggest clues are often nonverbal. Words can lie easily.
But body language.
Body language, tone of voice, much harder to fake convincingly. They often leak the truth.
Like those examples in the source feed pointing towards the door, even while someone's talking to you.
Yeah, suggesting they want to escape. Or the difference between a real smile, the kind that reaches the eyes, and a fake, just-the-mouth smile.
You know, when we see it usually.
We often feel it. But he thinks our culture tells us to ignore those gut feelings, to be too analytical. To get that skill back, you have to consciously quiet your internal chatter and just watch. Observe the signals. It takes practice.
This focus on signals and what's underneath feels connected to his ideas about seduction, which he uses in a broader way than just romance.
Right, much broader. For Greene, seduction is fundamentally about creating illusion, fantasy, atmosphere.
Okay.
And the core insight, according to the source, is that people actually want this. They crave it.
Why? Because reality is boring, harsh.
Often, yeah. Reality can be mundane, disappointing. Think about why Hollywood is so powerful, or great advertising, or compelling stories.
We want to be transported.
I think, yeah.
Led somewhere more interesting.
Exactly. People want to be led out of their everyday lives. And the ability to create that illusion, to tap into those desires and fantasies, that gives you influence. Power, even.
And the flip side, being anti-seductive.
Oh, yeah. These are the people who just repel others, often without realizing why.
What does that look like?
The source mentions things like talking way too much, especially about yourself, bragging, being overly moralistic, always judging right and wrong, being crude or vulgar inappropriately, or just having zero self-awareness about how they're landing on people. They drain the energy from the room.
Like emotional static.
Good way to put it. Now, this whole idea ties into something really interesting. Greene says that kind of pushes against a huge modern value. Authenticity.
Oh yeah, be authentic, you hear it everywhere.
Greene challenges this big time. He argues, based on the source, that 100% authenticity is mostly a myth. And historically, it's a value that waxes and wanes.
Comes and goes.
Yeah, he compared 18th century theater where playing your role well was key versus 19th century romanticism, which valued raw individual feeling. His point is, being human means wearing social masks.
We adapt, right? How we act at work versus with family versus with friends.
Of course. So according to Greene, the people we perceive as incredibly authentic, often they're just really, really good actors. They've mastered the performance of authenticity so well that it feels completely natural to us.
Wow. So authentic is just another role to play well.
From his perspective, often yes. The source had that example of the politician talking about his mother, sounded rehearsed, a bit awkward. The mask slipped. The performance of authenticity wasn't quite convincing.
That definitely makes you look at things differently. What's performance, what's real?
Exactly. And that leads right into knowing who you're dealing with. That line, when you meet a swordsman, draw your sword.
Sounds aggressive.
It's not about initiating aggression. It's about recognition. Recognize who you're facing.
See them clearly.
Yes, don't be naive. If you sense someone is manipulative or untrustworthy, you can't just interact with them openly and expect fairness. You need to adjust your approach.
That's where the gut feelings come back in, recognizing the signs.
Absolutely. Recognizing when you need to be more guarded, more strategic, essentially. Drawing your sword defensively, not offensively.
Okay. Matching the reality of the situation.
Yeah.
Which brings us to strategic thinking versus, what was it? Tactical hell.
Tactical hell, yeah, that's where most people live, he argues. Constantly reacting, putting out fires, dealing with the email that just landed, the immediate problem.
Just moment to moment.
Right. Strategic thinking is pulling back, looking at the bigger picture, thinking several steps ahead. What's the long-term goal here? What are the second and third order consequences of this action?
That Chuck Schumer example from the source seemed to illustrate this tension about the budget negotiation.
Right. Folding to avoid an immediate government shutdown might look like a win in the moment.
Right.
That's tactical. But strategically, Greene might argue, you just showed your opponent you're afraid to use your leverage. You blinked.
So it signals weakness for the next fight.
Exactly. They learn that if they push hard enough, you'll eventually cave to avoid short-term pain. Strategic thinking always keeps future interactions in mind.
That's a tough discipline when the immediate pressure feels so high.
Yeah.
This also seems linked to that classic fear versus love idea, often tied to Machiavelli.
Yeah. Machiavelli's famous line, safer to be feared than loved if you can't be both. Because love is unreliable, but fear ensures obedience.
But running things purely on fear sounds awful and
Yes.
probably ineffective long term.
Totally. The source makes that point too. Rule by fear alone and nobody tells you the truth. Creativity dies. People just tell you what they think you want to hear. Greene isn't advocating for tyranny.
So what's the balance then?
He suggests you need a touch of fear, not constant intimidation, but an underlying awareness that there are boundaries, there are consequences. People can still like you, respect you, even love you, but they also know you have limits and you're willing to enforce them.
Like those examples in the source, Netflix having few rules but enforcing them very visibly when broken, public firings as exclamation points of fear.
Right. A clear, sharp signal about consequences, but not constant oppressive oversight. Or think about Coach Vince Lombardi. Demanding, yes, but also care for his players. He wasn't ruling by fear day to day, but occasionally if someone really crossed a line, he'd make a harsh example to reinforce the team's standards.
So it's the potential for the whip, used sparingly and strategically, not constant use or none at all.
Exactly. It creates respect for the boundaries.
Okay, moving towards a more maybe personal philosophy angle, Greene apparently has this mantra, never whine, never complain, never trying to justify yourself.
That's got a real stoic flavor to it, doesn't it? It's about radical acceptance. Focus on what you can control, your response, your learning.
So don't waste energy on things you can't change.
Pretty much. And view everything, even the bad stuff, as training. An opportunity to get stronger, learn something, reframe challenges as growth opportunities rather than just suffering.
It makes me think of that analogy from the source about the bird song. Remember that?
Yeah, the woman hears beautiful music.
Right, from her window.
Yeah.
But outside, the birds are actually fighting over territory, trying to attract mates. It's struggle and conflict.
But her perspective transforms it into something beautiful. It really highlights how much our suffering comes from our judgment of events, labeling them good or bad.
When really they just are.
Right. We humans tend to overthink, layer on the judgment, the complaining, and make things worse for ourselves.
This idea of finding strength in adversity seems really connected to his upcoming book project.
Absolutely. The source mentions his next book, working title, The Law of the Sublime, was directly inspired by a major health crisis he went through.
He had a serious stroke, right, and a near-death experience.
Yeah, and that profoundly shifted the book's focus. It became about finding the extraordinary within the ordinary, tapping into these hidden reserves of human potential, willpower, energy that we usually don't access.
Like those extreme survival stories, the Andes plane crash was mentioned?
Exactly. Those situations force people to discover incredible inner powers they never knew they had. But his own experience became central too.
Oh, so.
Well, he lost his previous ways of finding inspiration, physical things like hiking, swimming. He had to learn to generate that feeling internally, to consciously feel it first, then write it.
So he had to live the principle himself.
Right. It became a real-world test of adapting, growing, embracing fate, amor fati, as the Stoics called it. When life throws you a curveball, you have to adjust.
And he feels the book is actually better because of this.
He does, because it forced him to find the sublime, not just in those dramatic external events, but in the everyday struggle, in the internal work, which ultimately makes it more accessible for readers trying to tap into that potential in their own lives.
That makes sense. Okay, final question from the source material. What advice would Greene give his younger self?
It was pretty simple, actually. Stop worrying so much. Enjoy youth more. It goes by incredibly fast.
A universal sentiment, maybe, even after analyzing all that power and strategy?
Yeah.
So wrapping this up, what's the big takeaway from this deep dive into Robert Greene's perspective? It's really important to stress this isn't about saying go out and manipulate people.
No, definitely not. It's about awareness. It's about understanding that these dynamics, power plays, social strategies, human nature quirks, they exist, whether we like it or not.
Greene's work, as presented in the source, is about encouraging realism over naivete. Understand the game being played around you.
Right. And knowing about these things, like unspoken hierarchies or the influence of others' energy or how to read situations better, it can equip you.
Equip you to navigate things more effectively, protect yourself, maybe even use the insights constructively, be less surprised by how things sometimes work.
So here's a final thought for you to chew on, pulling directly from our source. If Greene's right, and that person you perceive as incredibly authentic might actually just be very skilled at performing authenticity, how does that change how you view things?
Yeah, how does it change how you watch a leader give a speech, or a politician answer a question, or even just interact with people day to day?
And if everything is a sign, what subtle clues might you notice today if you consciously quieted that inner voice and just observed? What might you see differently?